Good morning, friends. Today we are going to discuss about various types of communication. This is the topic which is very important to understand the whole process of communication. In the previous lectures, we have studied about the process of communication, the definition of communication, how the process of communication goes on, okay, and how to improve your communication. We have talked about that. From today onwards, or for today's lecture, the topic for today's discussion is types of communication. What are the various types of communication? So let us see the types of communication. So you can look here. Types of communication can be done with the help of on the three bases. So these are the particular various bases on which you can do classification of communication. The first one is on the basis of style. What type of style you are following whenever you are communicating. So on the basis of style you have particular types of communication. Then on the basis of expression also, look here. On the basis of expression also you can have certain types of communication. And this is the second type of this is the second classification. And the third classification is on the basis of direction. So look here. So these are the three broad bases on which we can have various types of communication. So let us continue. Look here. So on the basis of this particular on the basis of style, we have two types of communication. First one is a formal communication. I think you might have heard this word, formal communication. And here we have second type on the basis of style, that is informal communication. So say for example, this online lecture is a kind of communication. So could you imagine what type of this communication is? So you can say that this online lecture is an example of formal communication. Why formal communication? Where so time, place, message, all these things are fixed. Who is going to deliver the lecture? Who is to whom this lecture is meant for? So all these things are pre-planned, and mostly the use of language is very formal also. So this lecture is an example of formal communication. And whenever you are talking with your father and mother, say for any friendly communication or communication with friend, will be called as a informal communication. So whenever you are talking with your friend, you need not to fix the topic, you need not to fix the time, place, and all these things. So and the language which you are going to use in this type of communication, informal communication, the language is very informal. So therefore it is called as a informal communication. So in formal communication, what is happen or what happens? In formal communication, it is very full of formalities and etiquettes, and informal communication is free from all types of formalities. Okay, so this is the first type of communication which is based on style. So you have to remember this word style very well. On the basis of style, you are having these two types of communication: formal communication, informal communication. So here, if you are talking with your teacher, if you are talking with any officer, that will be formal. If you are writing an application to your principal, so that will be formal communication. Okay. And if you are talking with your friend, okay, if you are talking with your family members, Okay, or you are talking with relatives even. So those are the examples of informal communication. Okay, so this was the first type of communication. Then the second, we have this second. Okay, we have this classification on the basis of expression, the way you express message, the way you transmit the message, and on the basis of expression, you have further two communications. First one is called as a formal verbal communication, and second one is called as a non-verbal communication. This verbal communication means using words. So any communication done with the help of words is called as a verbal communication. And you know that those words could be written as well as spoken. So therefore, verbal communication is further divided into two types. That is, first one is a written communication and second one is a spoken communication. And you remember well, in both these two communications, you have to use words. So words are very important here. So therefore, it is called as a verbal communication. And non-verbal communication is opposite of verbal communication. Okay. So what happen in verbal communication? Without words. So any kind of communication done without words is called as a normal non-verbal communication. Then you might be surprised that how it is possible that without words you can communicate. Yes, without words we communicate sometimes, though it is not very much similar with the written or spoken communication, but even though with the help of certain symbols and colors, diagrams, pictures, we can communicate with the help of those symbols and colors. Some signatures or signs are there. Okay, and with the help of those symbols, colors, pictures, we communicate, and that type of communication called as a non-verbal communication. Now I will draw one diagram and you will easily understood what I'm drawing or what I have drawn here. Okay, so whenever you see this symbol, you really understand or you really get a kind of message that this is a symbol of danger. This is dangerous place. We should keep away ourselves from this place. And therefore, this is the one. This is non-verbal. This is an example of non-verbal communication. Okay. So suppose you are traveling or you are driving a car or you are driving a bicycle or riding a bicycle or driving a motorcycle. You see certain traffic signals. So those traffic signals also are non-verbal communications. Then there are certain sirens buzzing on the road. So you immediately understood that if siren is there, ambulance is going on, and the people on the road they give way to those ambulance. Why? The siren indicate that there is an emergency. The patient is there, and he must be carried to immediately to certain hospital, and therefore to indicate that this emergency, the sirens they are there. So these are the examples. Sirens, traffic signals are there. Okay, then various symbols, colors are also used. You know that colors also indicate certain things. White color indicates peace. Okay, red color indicates, say for example, danger. Okay, green color indicates You can move, you can go. Orange color in traffic, I mean in traffic. So here colors and symbols and pictures, they are used to communicate certain messages, though these messages are very limited and simple and short. But even though this is a one another type of communication, it is called as a non-verbal communication. Why non-verbal? Because without word, it is done with the without words, and any communication done with the help of words is called as a verbal communication, and it is further carried into written and spoken. So what are the examples of written? So say for example books, any book written by a writer is an example of a written communication. Okay, any letter written by any person to anybody, later further they are carried, they are further divided, formal, informal, but that is not a topic of our lecture. So letters, books, reports. Okay, then essays, articles, stories. There are number of. So these are the examples of written communication. Whenever you write any application, so that is also applications. Whenever you are writing application, you are using written communication. Okay, and while spoken communication, any face-to-face communication. Spoken communication means you could come over here. Face-to-face communication. Any, say for example, lecture or offline lecture will be example of a spoken communication. Any kind of interview, you might have heard interviews on television. So in interview you might have seen that, or you will see that both the persons, they are there, the interviewee and the interviewer, they are present, and one person is asking questions to them and the other one is giving responses to those questions. So it is called as an interview. So interview is an example of spoken communication. In the same way, any face-to-face communication, sometimes nowadays telephonic conversation is also called as a spoken communication. Why? Because on telephone or mobile, say for example, mobile communication or communication on mobile. So that is also that is also example of spoken communication. This lecture itself is an example of spoken communication. Why I'm using words, I'm speaking in particular language and I'm trying to convey certain messages to you. So therefore lecture is also example of spoken communication, though I'm using written words also, but that lecture is mainly spoken. Okay, so these are the second way of dividing communication in different ways on the basis of expression, and we have these two types, verbal communication and non-verbal communication. In verbal communication we have written communication and spoken communication, and in non-verbal communication non-verbal communication, there are no further uh, uh, types, but there are some examples. Okay, so let us see the third way of. Okay, so this is what the another way of communication we have on the basis of direction. You can divide communication into on the basis of the direction, how the flow of communication or flow of information. What is important here? Flow of information. And if it is the flow of information from upside to down, that will be downward communication. If the flow of communication from downside to upward, so that will be upward communication. And if the flow of communication is on a equal level, at similar level, so that will be called as a horizontal communication. And one more type is there, that is called as a grapevine here, this is the fourth one which is not mentioned, but you should remember. In the first, this upward communication, what happens? The upward means like this. So sender is here and receivers are here. Downward communication, what is happening here? Once again, sender is here and receiver is here. In horizontal communication, the communication goes on like this. Here, these are the one-way communications. Upward communication, one-way communication. Downward communication, one-way communication. But horizontal is two-way, and sender is here and receiver is here. And though both are having equal authority, equal status. So these are the three types of communication. I will give you examples and then you will understand it. Okay, so the first one is upward communication. Say for example, students are here and they are talking with teacher. Okay, what is happening here? Students are requesting something to the teachers. Okay, so this type of communication will be called as a upward communication. Why? Because in this particular communication, the flow of communication is from lower side to higher side. Here, it is considered as a students, they are having lower authority than the teacher. And therefore, teacher, they are having higher authority, and therefore, the flow of communication will be in the kind of request, query, suggestions, whatever it may be.